Hello Varlets, welcome to Hive Scum Chemistry 101, and today I'm going to show you how to harness the power of your chemicals. From toxin time bombs to empowering you and your team's weaponry, this guide will show you the best way to bring war crimes into Tertium. Now, grab your safety goggles, because safety first, and let's get it on. The core idea behind this video is answering the question, what if I wanted to go full chem toxin and poison literally everything I touched? I've got good news. You can absolutely do that. Full disclosure, however, this build is still experimental since I haven't been able to stress test it as much as I'd like, especially in High Havoc. So understandably, I might tweak or revisit this build once I've gotten more experience and time playing with it. At the very least, it will give you something to chew on when it comes to approaching your own builds. Before we begin, this guide would probably be most useful if you already have some idea on what the Hive Scum has in terms of abilities and weapons. If you need a refresher on what does what, I have videos that cover just that. I'll put the link in the description. Should this particular type of gameplay appeal to you and you'd like to get your hands on the Hive Scum for yourself, consider wishlisting it through the link in the description as well. Now, let's start with the basics, which is putting together a toxin time bomb. To do this, we're going to pick up Stim Supply as our combat ability, and we'll need to take all of the supporting modifier nodes for this to work. Let me explain. Booby Trap will be how we convert our Stim Supply into a weapon. Upon exploding, it deals 200 base damage to everything it hits within a 3 meter radius and then applies 7 stacks of chem toxin to them. Here is a handy table to show you how much damage that does per tick and in total. As you can see, the Booby Trap node is capable of inflicting severe damage to unarmored and maniac enemies, basically designed to absolutely stuff Drake enemies as a faction. And you can mess up flak armor too. Fast acting stims does 2 very crucial things for the build. Number 1, it shortens the duration of stim supply to 5 seconds, basically acting as a 5-second fuse for our time bomb. Otherwise, we'd have to wait 20 seconds before the time bomb would detonate. Secondly, by only having it last for 5 seconds, we can initiate the cooldown of stim supply faster. If the crate is still around, its cooldown won't actually start, and this is important because it affects the final node, Practice Deployment, where we can reset the cooldown of stim supply as soon as we pick up a stim or have one available for use. If you pick up a stim while stim supply crate is still on the field, you won't actually be able to reset its deployment cooldown. This is why fast acting stims is important to getting the crate to explode faster. With that, we only need one more component left, opening up the stim lab and putting a single point into any of the tier 1 nodes of your cartel special stim. Doing so sets our cartel stim cooldown to be 15 seconds, and thanks to practice deployment, it also means our stim supply time bomb has a cooldown of 15 seconds. This is the minimum investment you need to make to get a time bomb working. Now, the main problem with this is that you've used 2 core abilities just so you can drop a bomb that explodes every 15 seconds. The actual cartel stim part is kind of wasted because all it's doing is providing a single tier 1 buff, which is essentially nothing. The next best optimization you can do is to actually make use of your cartel stim so that it provides a tangible benefit for you and your team. The longest you can hold a buff from your stim is 20 seconds, 5 seconds while standing inside the radius of your crate, and then 15 seconds after it expires thanks to fast acting stims. So what we'd like to do here is spend some points to get our stims cooldown to 20 seconds or as close as possible. If we take a couple of extra tier 1 nodes, we'll hit the 20-second cooldown timer. If we took all 4 tier 1 nodes, we'd hit 22 seconds, which isn't too bad. However, a bunch of tier 1 nodes as a buff isn't really going to be all that helpful. Instead, the better option is to pick up a single tier 2 node. This places our cooldown exactly at 20 seconds on the dot. And after looking through all the options, I have concluded that as far as benefits go for a 3-point investment in our cartel stim, the attack speed branch is the superior choice. Here's why. With these 2 nodes, we're getting plus 8% attack speed, plus 50% weapon swap speed, minus 15% stamina cost. This is basically the same as having just over 3 stacks of Frenzied Blows from the Ogrin, 1 motion from the Veteran, and the Zealous Aura from the Zealot. I think this is a pretty good deal, all things considered. The alternative is taking the damage branch and getting a plus 8% strength boost, which is the same as having 1 stack of Blaze Away or Slaughterer. This would also be in general more applicable to everyone. With this iteration of the Toxin Time Bomb, you now have a chemical explosive with a 20-second cooldown, which also supplies your allies with a decent combat and utility buff for at least 15 seconds. This build is entirely self-contained and is not dependent on any other factors, so whether you're playing on Malice or on Havoc40, the combination of mechanics will work just the same to give you as much uptime as possible for both the Toxin Time Bomb and the buffs from your stim. This is good, but how can we make it better? What if we wanted to make our stims stronger to not only boost our weapon damage, but also improve the lethality of our chem toxins and give our team stronger benefits too? More investment in our cartel stim means a longer cooldown, which reduces the uptime of the time bomb and the buffs as well. This is where Sample Collector comes into play. Sample Collector allows any kill we make to regenerate a percentage of our cartel stim's cooldown. Regular kills will grant 1%, while enemies infected by chem toxin will regenerate 2% instead. This talent node introduces scaling into the build, affording us to take bigger buffs on our stims, but not feel the total weight of the additional cooldown from it as long as we can kill things quick enough. For example, if I want my cartel stim to maximize my chem toxin damage, I'd invest in the damage branch and pick up the rending nodes along the way. This increases my chem toxin effectiveness against carapace and unyielding enemies, the two armor types which are relatively tough against chem toxin. Doing so would push my cartel stim's cooldown to 51 seconds, and so my toxin time bomb would also be 51 seconds. However, if we give ourselves a fully chem toxin loadout, taking the bone saw, the needle pistol, and picking up blackout grenades with the pocket toxin talent, any kill we make reduces the cooldown of our cartel stims by 2%, or about 1 second for every kill with the current cartel stim concoction. Heck, even the time bomb exploding and killing things will also refund part of its cooldown thanks to Sample Collector. With enough enemies nearby, you can very easily get your cartel stim's cooldown back just before or right after the stim's buff expires. Don't forget that your cartel stim now increases your chem toxin damage by a lot. This allows you to perform a lethal double tap against crushers on Damnation and Auric if you hit them in the head with your needle pistol. And if you need to bring down tougher crushers in Havoc, sending a few more needles into their head will help with that. From here, you can adjust your cartel stim's concoction to whatever you'd like. What I have here is a balance between passive cooldown and effectiveness. Further investment into your cartel stim will be viable as long as you have enough enemies to kill. Here is a cartel stim cocktail menu I made before, so you can see at a glance what you can make. If you want to go all in for a combat utility stim for your team, investing fully into the damage branch, ending with whichever path you like, along with taking the cooldown branch that ends in the 25% cooldown regeneration node, you will provide your team with plus 50% cooldown regeneration, plus 20% strength, and one of 15% rending, 35% finesse, or 15% critical chance. The damage part of the stim is easy to understand, but the cooldown part basically means your team will either get 22.5 seconds or 30 seconds worth of cooldown back across the duration of the stim, depending on how long they stayed inside the stim supplies radius for. While not necessarily useful for you, since your combat ability is tied to your stim's cooldown, shaving off between 7.5 to 15 seconds worth of cooldown can be game-changing in the higher difficulties. Maybe letting your team get a clutch chorus, shout, taunt, or bubble off. To end this video, I'm going to leave you with an experimental build. In theory, most of its parts make sense, but there's probably some fine-tuning that needs to happen. I won't run through the whole thing, but rather point out the key parts that help support the build. This build can be found on Games Lantern as well, which I'll also put in the description. In Your Face gives your chem toxin extra damage depending on your distance as long as you've got your needle pistol out. Blackout Grenade is chosen because it pairs with the pocket toxin to act as another source of chem toxin for Sample Collector to work with. Do note that chem toxin kills do not count towards the grenade regeneration aspect. You must get close range kills with your melee weapon and hope your direct damage does the killing blow in this case, since everything else is chem toxin damage. You can consider swapping to the brittleness coating if you want to farm your grenades back so your chem toxin won't accidentally kill your target. Gunslinger Improved Aura is mainly to help support your team's ammo economy rather than yourself. We'll be running Pickpocket so we won't have any ammo problems while actively using the needle pistol, as long as we take out some elites and specials along the way. Punching above one's weight gives our chem toxin extra damage against elites and monsters, the perfect enemies who can take on a lot of toxin damage. Toxin Mania gives us some bonus damage as long as the enemies are infected by chem toxin, which all of our attacks will deal. And since all of our attacks are dealing chem toxin anyway, we might as well take targeted toxin to weaken enemy attacks, especially against monsters. And we'll also take Toxin Renewal to make all our melee kills with the Bone Saw restore 15% toughness. I think this one is optional depending on how you're feeling. For our keystone, the only one that made sense to me was Adrenaline Frenzy. We are taking this to help buff up our Bone Saw if we have to engage in melee, and we're taking Adrenaline Assassin to help out with building stacks. We didn't take the dependency keystone like you might have been expecting because cooling our crate down faster has no point to it if our stim is still on cooldown, since it won't benefit the team other than having access to your time bomb. I also find that having different cooldowns can sometimes be a problem because it can cause a desync. If you deploy your crate just before your stim comes back, you'll miss the timing of practice deployment resetting the cooldown. Because you have to actively use your stim to maintain dependency stacks, you can also find yourself deploying a crate that doesn't buff your team and only functions as a Toxin Time Bomb. So now you're in a position of having one but not the other, and the flow of the build kind of gets a little muddled and janky. But then again, this build is experimental, so it may be subjected to change in the future. Alright, that's all the time I have for today. Class dismiss. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Varlets.